Ladies and gentlemen, behold the glory of the Tier 8 Soviet destroyer Delny, which was quite unfortunately nerfed in this past update, and that's what we'll be covering today, the nerf to the Delny. According to the patch notes, quote, Delny went above and beyond what we expected her to do. Hence, a nerf is appropriate for her turret traverse and gun reload. However, to sweeten this bitter pill, we're improving the shell damage a tad. The aim is to lower the average damage a pinch and get her to be a little less effective with multiple targets. So the main battery HE shell damage was increased from a base 1900 to 2050, and the maximum AP damage was increased from 2600 to 2850. But the main battery reload time was decreased from a base of 4 seconds to 5 seconds, and the turret traverse on the upgraded version of the guns was increased from 9 to 13.8 seconds. All in all, do these nerfs really matter? Do they make the Delny less effective? The answer to that is not really. The only thing that makes the Delny less effective is when you're busy doing something else while playing the game, and you neither notice the Shimakaze next to you or the island in front of you, and then you ram into the island right in front of the Shimakaze. Luckily, the Shimakaze has smoked up, so he's not able to spot us, and all is well. We've sent some torpedoes into his smoke screen, but the main point here is that the nerf to the Delny's DPM, it is actually significant on paper. I went and did the math, and following this nerf, the Delny's high explosive DPM has been cut down by something like 30 or 40k, at least on paper. In practice, though, the extra reload time isn't all that bad, and the extra alpha strike on the HE is actually a good thing, especially the way that I run the Delny. I, of course, have Anton Gurin on this ship, and in his legendary row of skills, I have I think it's called Rather Be Torching skill, which increases the fire chance on the destroyer high explosive shells at the expense of alpha strike. So prior to the nerf, my alpha strike on the HE was something around 1800 or 1700 because of that skill. But following the nerf, which actually buffed the HE alpha, my alpha strike with that skill running is 1900 even, the exact same as the original alpha strike on the Delny. So in some ways, this is sort of like a buff, at least on my build. The Delny is more effective, actually, against enemy destroyers because the alpha on the HE is higher. Now, we haven't actually done any damage in this game at all, and we're only going to start by harassing this Ibuki. We get lucky enough to get a fire on the first salvo, and we're going to continue peppering him for as long as we can see him. But our goal right now is to get over to the Bravo cap, which is turned red, and there's a destroyer inside of it. We're pretty confident that we're going to be able to go toe-to-toe with this destroyer, take him out, and hopefully take the cap for our team. And this game is going to turn into a good example of how to recognize the win conditions and how to secure the win conditions rather than throw them away at the end of this game. We are, in fact, going to carry, as you can do in the Delny. It is, after all, the most effective Tier 8 destroyer. Speaking of effectiveness, and circling back to the buff to the Alpha Strike, the AP was buffed as well. And just ask this Yamato whether he thinks the Delny has been rendered less effective from this buff. What did we do, like 7-10k there to him with the AP and his broadside, and our fire eventually took him out? Yeah, the Delny is a force to be reckoned with. Montana out there, he just shot at us, did get a lucky hit. That's not something we can just brush off and ignore. It is a crime to actually hit the Delny, and those who commit such a crime need to be punished appropriately. Unfortunately, the Montana is sailing out of our gun range, which is the only gripe that I actually have with the Delny. I do wish it had longer gun range or got access to the gun range mod in the 4th slot. I still find it a little bit strange that both the Tashkent at tier 7 and the Khabarovsk at legendary tier can have gun ranges longer than the Delny, but who am I to question the balancing decisions of the wargaming development department? In any case, we've spotted the Z46. Perhaps some people would think that this is a rather huge threat to me because the Z46, after all, does have German sonar, and I am caught in the German sonar. Therefore, I am spotted. But the thing about being spotted by German sonar is that it doesn't really matter if nothing's around to shoot you. And as far as we can tell just by looking at the minimap, there's only that Z46 in this cap, and then there's a battleship behind one of the islands over here, so there's really nothing that can shoot at us. A cruiser from the other side of the map is attempting to do so, but the Delny is so fast and so maneuverable that those floaty cruiser shells have no hope of hitting it. And of course, the Z46 does have advanced awareness that we were coming around this corner, so he comes out to meet us as well, but it's all in vain. He barely does any damage to us, and we're able to take him out in 2 salvos for our second kill. This clears the cap, so we should be able to take it. Conqueror coming around the corner, little bit of a scary thing, but we've gone unspotted, so his nuclear bomb HE cannot hurt us. We're going to take this capture circle before we do anything else. The Soviet destroyers are not necessarily the best for taking capture circles. They're not always well suited to it, since they're more like mini cruisers than they are destroyers. That does make it a little bit difficult, challenging sometimes to fulfill the primary role of a destroyer, which is taking capture circles, but in this case, we're able to do that, and we knew we would be able to do that securely just by looking at the map and noting that the Z46 and this battleship Conqueror were the only things standing in our way of this capture circle, which has just become ours. We flipped it solo, launched some torpedoes a little bit earlier at the Conqueror. One of them manages to hit and cause a flood, which the Conqueror promptly stops with his damage control party. So we're going to increase the distance a little bit now that we've taken the cap, and we're going to open fire on the Conqueror with high explosive, try to light a fire on him. I have switched something on my Anton Gurin build, by the way. In his third row of skills, he has access to the Perceptive skill, which of course gives you the RPF indicator that points in the direction of the nearest enemy target, and also decreases destroyer damage and increases torpedo visibility range. A valuable skill by anybody's standards if they play destroyers, I would say, but I've switched it for the one that increases accuracy on the destroyer's main guns at the expense of 5% HP. So that does lower my overall HP by about 1,000, but I do have William Sims as one of the inspirations, so I still have more HP than base regardless, and it makes the guns more accurate, which I think increases the damage and also increases the chances that you're going to start a fire. Obviously, it doesn't modify the fire chance, but it makes it more likely that more of your 6 shells are going to hit, which in turn gives you, in practice, an increased fire chance. And it's working out pretty well, I think. The loss of the 1,000 hit points with William Sims already there to offset that to a large degree, it really doesn't matter. And the extra accuracy on these guns is nice. I kind of don't even miss the RPF indicator, and we certainly didn't need it in this game. Now that we're far enough away from the Conqueror, and that he is sailing away from the cap, we are opening fire on him, attempting to light his ship on fire as he retreats, and just make sure that he's not actually going to sail into the Bravo cap in order to take it. If he does, there's really nothing there to stop him except me. There's a battleship right next to me, but that battleship is being approached by a Montana over on the other side of this island, and if the Conqueror wanted to shoot at that battleship, he and the Montana could probably take it out, and the enemy team wouldn't have that big of a challenge in recapturing Bravo. But the good news is the other friendly destroyer on our team is now in the Charlie cap and flipping it. The Shimakaze has been spotted again, 8 kilometers away on almost no health, so we have to take this opportunity and try to sink him. He vanishes as we send our second salvo, and it's all for naught, but the Montana's sailing into our torpedoes, switching fire to him, getting a fire as he moves in. Doesn't look like any of our torpedoes are going to hit, and it seems like we've got some Shimakaze torpedoes incoming that we're going to have to dodge, but they are, of course, widespread torpedoes, and, well, they're no threat to me, but my torpedoes were apparently a huge threat to the Shimakaze. He goes down. That's a nice thing about the Delny, by the way, is that it has 8-kilometer torpedo range. So while it's not a torpedo boat, and you definitely want to play it more like a miniature cruiser the way I have been with kiting around and dodging enemy fire, even though it's not a cruiser, or a destroyer rather, even though it's more like a cruiser, the 8-kilometer torpedo range can be useful. We're on 3 kills now, over 100,000 damage. We've got 1 solo cap to our name. There are 2 enemy destroyers left and 1 enemy cruiser there are 2 enemy battleships left and 1 enemy cruiser versus 2 friendly destroyers and a friendly cruiser. Ship count is even, but the enemy is ahead of us on points by a little bit less than 100 points. We can't allow them to take this capture circle. We need to have either 3 caps or we need to sink an enemy ship in order to gain or acquire a points lead. There are less than 4 minutes left to go in this game, so that's what we're thinking about. We're asking ourselves, how can we get over the enemy team on points? There's a Worcester, last enemy cruiser. Very dangerous to us. It does have 10 guns that fire rapidly, and it also has radar. But at longer ranges, the Worcester shells are so floaty that it becomes increasingly difficult to hit a small maneuverable target like the Delny, especially when it's actively maneuvering. So the Worcester has no hope whatsoever of hitting us, while we actually hit him and begin to remove his remaining hit points. We've got a fire burning on him. He really doesn't have that much HP left. The fire is still going. My real concern here is that if the Worcester maintains his position in that cap without being spotted, and nobody shoots and resets him, he is going to take the cap, and that's going to spell doom for our team. So I'm going to move in now, pretty confident that I'll be able to demolish this Worcester in 1 to 2 salvos and not take too much damage in return. And the first salvo, well, it lands all on his armor and the shells shatter. But the second salvo, we do get a penetration into his superstructure. He hits us once, we kick on the brakes. He hits us again, but it's too late. He's been taken out. Point situation is now 740 to 775, and one of the battleships is in the cap. We cannot allow this battleship to flip the cap or accrue points from it. The point situation is too quick. In order to overtake the enemy team on points, we must either stop the Conqueror from taking this cap, or at least contest it, or we need to sink a battleship, and the Conqueror has taken the cap. So we're now even on points with the enemy team ahead of us, and pulling in an even amount of points with every tick of the clock. We need to do something in order to get a points lead. The only way to do that is to sink one of these battleships, or, alternatively, the friendly destroyer can enter the Delta cap and contest it. If he does that, the enemy team stops accruing points from Delta, and also doesn't accrue points from this cap since I am contesting it. Meanwhile, my team accrues points from both Alpha and Charlie, and as a result, we will overtake the enemy team on points before this game ends. There's less than 1 minute left to go. All we have to do to win is nothing. Now, we can sail out of this cap. It's 8-12 versus 8-14. We will be ahead of the enemy team on points as soon as the friendly destroyer flips that cap circle. Actually, even before it. We've taken the lead now, 8-24 to 8-20. We just have to not die to this Conqueror. And the Conqueror does spot us coming around that island. He shoots, but we're too fast. His shells come nowhere near us. Less than 30 seconds left to go, and we're 10 points ahead of the enemy team. The friendly destroyer is not in a position where he's going to die from one of the enemy battleships, and we're not in a position where we will be spotted. So we'll get some last-minute damage, shooting once at that Frederick de Grossa. We're at 117. We stay at 117 because all the shells shatter, But with less than 3 seconds left to go on the clock, there's no reason not to troll that conqueror, reveal our position, and take our glorious win. Good example, I think, of recognizing the win conditions, something that you need to keep an eye on when you're playing this game, obviously. There are certain things you want to do and certain things you don't want to do. For example, if I had gone after those battleships aggressively, I might have perished and we might have lost. But I didn't. I played the objectives instead, and there you go. In any case, the Delny Nerf is not much of a nerf at all. No reason to worry. This ship obviously still performs well. Hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.